Most people who proudly believe they're awake are, in truth, still deeply asleep, and the strangest part is that they have no idea. That's the real paradox. The moment someone asks, "How do I know if I'm awakened?" they unknowingly expose the very illusion they're trapped in. They think they're seeking clarity, but the question itself comes from the same dreamlike state they're trying to escape. It's like a sleeper asking how to confirm they're not dreaming, without realizing that the very one asking is the dream character. The video opens exactly here, in this unsettling recognition that the seeker is part of the problem, that the desire to be awakened usually comes from the same egoic restlessness that keeps a person unconscious. The shock is not that people are lost, it's that they're lost while believing they've already arrived. This is the crack in the facade. The moment the viewer begins to suspect that what they call awareness might just be another layer of sleep. Not being awake has nothing to do with spiritual ignorance or a lack of insight. It has everything to do with the invisible filter you've been looking through your entire life. The ego is not just a psychological concept, it's a constant lens, a commentary machine that overlays the raw world with labels, judgments, and assumptions. You don't experience reality as it is. You experience the story your mind tells about it. And this is the first revelation. The issue isn't the world, but the mental layer sitting between you and the world. The mind interprets before you can even see. It narrates before you can experience. Awakening begins the moment you realize that you never actually met reality directly, only your thoughts about it. The tree, the sky, the people around you, even your own emotions, all have been filtered through concepts and expectations, so automatically that you've mistaken the filter for the truth. The path starts when you finally notice the veil. Imagine looking at a tree. You think you're seeing it, but you're not. What you're actually seeing is the word tree, the categories you learned, the memories you've attached, the usefulness you were taught to assign. Your mind rushes to describe, define, organize, and in doing so, it replaces the living reality with a dead concept. This is the same mechanism that makes people believe they re-spiritually awake, when all they've redone is traded one set of ideas for another. They haven't shifted perception, they've only updated the vocabulary of their sleep. The video uses this metaphor to reveal the core mistake. We confuse the menu for the meal, the map for the territory, the label for the thing itself. We believe we're aware, but our awareness keeps collapsing into thinking. And as long as we're experiencing our concepts instead of the world directly, we remain unawakened, trapped in a thin, conceptual version of life, while the true, vibrant reality stands unnoticed right in front of us. Most people move through life in a kind of mental hypnosis, though they would never call it that. Thoughts arise, endlessly judgments, memories, predictions, fears, and we mistake this constant inner chatter for genuine living. The mind narrates everything like a compulsive commentator, and we take its story as the world itself. We don't question the trance because it feels normal. It feels like me. But this automatic stream is precisely what keeps us asleep. We confuse thinking about reality with experiencing reality. And because the mind never stops talking, we rarely notice the difference. The tragedy is that we inhabit our interpretations instead of the moment unfolding right in front of us. We react not to life, but to the mental version of life we've constructed. In this section, the viewer is guided to see that the prison is internal, self-reinforcing, and invisible, made entirely of thoughts believed without examination. Awakening becomes impossible until we recognize that we've been living inside a narrative rather than the present moment itself. Children encounter the world with a purity adults can barely remember. They don't look at a puddle and think water, displacement, or dirty shoes. They simply fall into the wonder of what is in front of them. A butterfly, an entry in a mental catalog, a moving miracle that captures their whole attention. They live in direct contact with reality because their minds haven't yet layered everything with concepts. But as we grow, we're taught to replace presence with thinking. We're trained to label, judge, analyze, and categorize before we ever truly see. School, society, and even well-meaning adults gradually pull us out of the immediacy of experience and into the constant mental narrative that becomes our default state. In this shift, we fall asleep without noticing. What the video highlights is that awakening isn't gaining something new, it's recovering something forgotten. It's a return to that primordial clarity, to perceiving life before the mind rushes in to tell us what we're seeing. The turning point comes when you finally realize that you have never seen anything anything without the mind stepping in first. Every sight, every sound, every emotion has been filtered, labeled, explained, and judged before you ever had a chance to meet it directly. This realization is both simple and unsettling. The world you thought you were experiencing was mostly your mind talking about the world. And in that instant, something cracks. You begin to notice the constant commentary, the ceaseless narration that overlays every moment. You notice how quickly the mind interrupts reality with opinions, memories, and comparisons. And then, perhaps for a brief second, the commentary pauses not because you force it, but because the truth of your unconsciousness becomes impossible to ignore. That pause is the first breath of awakening. In the sudden quiet, reality appears raw, unfiltered, new. You discover that what you always assumed was awareness was actually thought, and the trance begins to break. The illusion of a separate me begins to unravel when you see the narrator in your mind for what it truly is, a voice, a stream of thoughts, a pattern, not a self. As long as you believe that this inner commentator is you, awakening is impossible, because you're still fused with the very mechanism that keeps you asleep. The video exposes this misconception gently but decisively. If you can observe the voice, then you cannot be the voice. Something deeper, quieter, and vastly more spacious is doing the observing. This is the beginning of real wakefulness, the moment you recognize the gap between awareness and the mental character you've been identified with for years. The I you've defended, worried about, tried to improve, and endlessly narrated is just a construct, a mask made of memory and habit. When this becomes clear, the identity you thought was solid starts to dissolve. What remains isn't a new version of you, but the simple recognition that you were never the voice in your head to begin with. Once the mental character loses its claim as your true identity, something far more expansive comes into view. You begin to sense that you are not the stream of thoughts drifting through your mind, but the open space in which those thoughts appear and disappear. This awareness isn't dramatic or mystical, it's simple, quiet, and unmistakably real. It feels less like discovering something new, and more like remembering something you somehow forgot. In this recognition, the sleeping self is exposed as a psychological construct, a bundle of habits, preferences, fears, and memories pretending to be a solid person. You see that this character was never the one living your life. It was just a story unfolding within a much larger field of consciousness. And as your identity shifts from the limited figure in the narrative to the awareness holding the entire narrative, everything subtly widens. You aren't an isolated mind peering out at the world. You're the vastness in which the world and the idea of you is happening. As the sense of being a separate I begins to fade, a deeper truth emerges almost effortlessly. The boundary you always assumed existed between yourself and the world was never actually there. The separation was psychological, not real. You start to notice that everything you experience, sounds, sensations, emotions, even the breath, arises in the same field of awareness you once called me. The idea of being an isolated individual navigating a foreign universe begins to feel like a dream you've finally awakened from. The video reveals that as long as you believe yourself to be a lone entity struggling for survival, you remain asleep in the illusion of separateness. True awakening is the realization that you are not a fragment within the cosmos, but the very activity of the cosmos expressing itself as this moment. Through these eyes, this body, this perspective, you are not in the universe like an object in a room. You are the universe in motion, briefly appearing as a human life. And in this recognition, the loneliness of individuality dissolves into an undeniable sense of unity. You begin to see that the sense of being a personal controller, someone steering life through force and intention, was always an illusion. Thoughts arise on their own, without your permission. Emotions surface uninvited. The body breathes, digests, heals, and moves through countless processes without a single conscious command. Life is happening through you, not because of you. The video reveals this with almost surgical clarity. The you that believed it was awake was simply another thought, another character in the story claiming authorship over events it never initiated. When this becomes obvious, there's a strange mixture of humility and relief. The burden of being the orchestrator of everything falls away, and you realize you were never the captain of the ship, because there is no separate captain. There is only the unfolding of nature, infinitely intelligent, effortlessly precise. expressing itself through every heartbeat, every breath, every moment. The true awakening is recognizing that you are not directing life. You are being lived by the same force that moves the tides and opens a flower at dawn. The fear of not being awakened yet is itself part of the illusion, because it comes from the very ego that awakening exposes as unreal. The mind clings to the idea of spiritual progress, of arriving somewhere, of achieving some higher state, but all of that is just the ego trying to secure its own survival under a more sophisticated disguise. The video makes this clear. The one who worries about awakening is the same fictional character that awakening dissolves. Real wakefulness isn't something you attain. It's what remains when the pressure to control, to improve, or to reach a final destination falls away completely. The paradox is that as long as you're striving to awaken, you stay asleep, because the seeker is part of the dream. The moment you see that the effort to get there is driven by the illusion of a separate self, something relaxes. A quiet surrender replaces the struggle, and in that letting go, when there is no more reaching, no more trying, the space of genuine awareness opens naturally, without force. Time reveals itself as another layer of the dream. As long as you're mentally replaying the past or rehearsing the future, you're not actually awake, you're lost in imagination. The video confronts the viewer with this quiet but radical truth. Almost everything we call living happens in memories and projections, not in the immediacy of the present moment. We drift through life as if carried by a fictional timeline, believing that our identity is stitched together from what has already happened and what might happen next. But awareness doesn't exist in those mental spaces. It exists only here, in the unrepeatable now. And the startling realization is that you may not have truly been here for years. The mind is so accustomed to wandering that presence feels unnatural at first, almost too simple to matter. Yet the moment you actually drop into the now, even for a breath, the trance begins to dissolve. Reality becomes vivid. The world feels newly born, and in that single moment of genuine presence, you glimpse what it means to finally wake up. When the mental stream finally loosens its grip, an unexpected silence appears, subtle, spacious, and strangely familiar. It's not something you create or force. It emerges the moment the mind stops dominating your attention. In this silence, you catch the first real glimpse of awakening, not as an idea but as a direct, undeniable experience. It's not a revelation that arrives in words, nor a sophisticated insight you can analyze. It's something much simpler, a clear sense that there is an awareness here, quietly present, effortlessly observing everything, thoughts, sensations, sounds, yet untouched by any of them. You realize that this awareness was always in the background, like a steady light behind the shifting images of a film. For the first time, you notice that the ego is just another appearance within that field, not the one perceiving it. And in that recognition, even if only for a moment, the center of gravity shifts. You're no longer lost inside the thinking mind. You're standing as the presence that sees. This is the experiential turning point, the doorway into true wakefulness. When you finally recognize that you were never truly awake, something unexpected happens. Life becomes lighter, not heavier. The pressure to be perfect, to make the right decisions, to evolve fast enough, to constantly monitor your spiritual progress, all of it begins to dissolve. The fear of missteps fades because you see that there is no separate you trying to control the choreography of existence. Life is moving on its own, and you are simply part of its movement. The video illustrates this shift beautifully. Once the illusion of the struggling, striving self falls away, what remains is a sense of effortless participation. Life stops feeling like a test you might fail, and starts feeling like a dance you're already part of. There's no dancer separate from the music, no observer separate from the moment. Actions unfold naturally, responses arise without strain, and even difficulties lose their heaviness because you no longer interpret them as personal burdens. Instead, everything becomes part of a larger rhythm, fluid, interconnected, and strangely joyful. Everything in the video gathers into a single, disarming truth. Real awakening isn't about gaining wisdom, reaching enlightenment, or ascending to some higher state. It's the simple, almost embarrassing realization that you've been asleep inside a character you mistook for yourself. All the fears, ambitions, memories, and narratives you defended so fiercely belonged to a psychological costume, not to the awareness behind it. The true you was never the thinker, never the narrator, never the personality you carried like an identity badge. And the irony, the quiet, profound twist at the end, is that this recognition cannot happen in thought. The mind can talk about awakening endlessly, but it can never deliver it. Awakening only occurs in the living immediacy of this moment, when the commentary stops long enough for you to sense what has been here all along, a silent presence untouched by time, story, or effort. It's not a future achievement. It's not an intellectual conclusion. It is the startling clarity of discovering that what you truly are is the awareness witnessing this very instant. The closing moment unfolds not as a conclusion, but as an invitation, quiet, direct, and impossibly simple. Stop searching for proof that you're awake. Stop measuring your progress or comparing your state to some imagined ideal. Instead, just notice what is here, right now, without reaching for it, without naming it, without trying to capture it in thought. Feel the breath. Hear the sounds. Sense the aliveness that doesn't need your permission to exist. In this effortless awareness, something becomes unmistakably clear. You hadn't been living in the present at all. You were chasing concepts of awakening while missing the immediacy of the moment itself. And yet, in the very act of noticing this, the shift happens. The realization of your sleep and the awakening from it occur in the same breath. There is no drama, no fireworks. Just a quiet recognition that the presence you've been seeking has been here the entire time, waiting beneath the noise. This simple, wordless moment is the true beginning.